Hi everyone, this is Ashley with CT Arena Digitals. I'm going to do a tutorial to show you how to use my new Summer Skinny digital backdrops in Photoshop. I have other tutorials using these as well if you want to look through the YouTube channel if you want more than this one. These also can be used, I'm going to do two edits. I'm going to do it using a skinny as intended, but they can also be used as full digital backdrop overlays in Photoshop as well. But I'm going to do the skinny first. I'm going to be using this image. You can use place embedded if you want to be able to switch through them quickly. I'm going to be copy and pasting today because I already have them open here in Photoshop. So I'm going to start on my image and I'm going to select my subject, which Photoshop literally just updated for me today. So I'm doing that a different way as well. I'm going to use my contextual taskbar. If it's not visible, you can just go up to window and make sure it is checked down here. So I'm going to go ahead and select my subject. If you have a different method to do that, you can do it however you want. Okay, so it looks pretty good for the selection. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate my layer and create a layer mask. And then I'm going to click on my background layer here. And then I'm going to go grab the digital that I want to use. And I'm going to select all, edit, copy, and edit and paste into my image. And then first I'm going to just resize and get it to where I think I want it to be, or about where I want it to be. I obviously want it center. I just don't know how big I want to do it yet. I think that looks good. And it just depends on what your digital looks like, or your initial image looks like, if you're going to be able to use the full digital, or whether you need to drag it up a little bit. I'm going to drag mine up a little bit. So I'm just going to lose a little bit of the sky and the trees there. Okay, press OK. And now you want your light that's falling on your skinny to match the light that's falling onto your backdrop. I understand that you want it to look like it's actually hanging in the studio, so it may not matter to you, but it is going to look a lot more pleasing to the eye if you have the digital coming from the same direction. Okay, and then I'm going to add a little bit, actually I'm going to zoom in first here to my subject, and I'm going to clean up the edges, because you can see this didn't really, it's very soft on the edges and I want it to be harder there. So I'm going to use a hard brush this time, 100% opacity, 100% flow, black brush on my layer mask there, and I'm just going to make that edge a little bit sharper there. I go around the whole image and just do that first before I try to paint off anything, to be able to see the digital through her dress, since she's wearing tulle. I get a lot of questions for tulle dresses and how to best blend them. So I like to do tutorials including them when I can. Okay. And you can fast forward through this part if you'd like. The good thing about using skinnies is you don't have to edit the feet and the bottom of the dress and the shadows down at the bottom. It makes it a little bit easier, cuts down on some editing time. So we only have to worry about where our digital starts here. Once we get into doing the texture overlay, we'll have to mess around with that a little bit, but oops. I did my Photoshop update yesterday and it's crashed on me like 10 times since, which is very frustrating. So hopefully it doesn't do that during the tutorial. Okay, I think the rest looks pretty good. There's some on the sleeve right here. Okay, so now I'm going to zoom out And as you can see, that cleaned it up a lot. And now I'm going to use a soft brush, soft, bigger brush at about 20% opacity. I'm going to zoom in here. And now since she's wearing tulle, you would not do this if she had on like a regular slim or a dress that you could not see through. But I'm just going to, on the very edge, actually I don't think I want to do 20%, I think I only want to do 10% here. Just going to brush off a little bit so you can see through her dress in the areas that you would be able to if you actually shot her on this backdrop. Okay, and then if you need to paint anything back on, I think I'm going to paint on a little bit down here. I'm going to use my white brush instead and paint that back on just a little bit. Okay, now zoom out. Now I can see on her hair, I'm going to zoom in for just a second, you kind of have this like cloudy mess that copy and pasted or Photoshop didn't select. I'm actually just going to click on my subject layer and I'm going to use my burn tool. You can also add a new layer and I'll do that too. You can use the burn tool on that was on midtones, on shadows, and just paint over those flyaways and they'll darken right up. Or you can create another layer and right click, create clipping mask, and put it on hard light. And then use your brush. I'm going to put it up to 100% opacity at first. And then I'm going to hold down Alt on my keyboard and I'm going to click her hair color. And then I'm going to brush that in to darken up that spot. You can lower the opacity once you're done if you need to. And I got a little bit on the dress there that I don't want. And that was really the only spot that I needed to do that. Zoom back out and now that before and after that spot right up here by her hair is gone. Okay, next I want to add some shadow. She's pretty close to the backdrop. I want it to seem like she's pretty close to the backdrop. So I'm going to add some shadow on the skinny. So I'm going to create a layer above that layer. And I'm going to create my clipping mask. You can either right click and create clipping mask, or you can hold down Alt on your keyboard and click between those layers once that arrow shows up. I'm going to change it to multiply blending mode. Grab my brush, make it a little bigger. I'm going to do about 15% opacity. I'm going to hold down Alt on my keyboard and I'm just going to click a neutral color, darker neutral color here on the backdrop. And then I'm just going to paint in some shadow back here. I'm going to paint some in up here too. Okay, and now I want to create the shadow for the actual skinny on my original backdrop. So now I'm going to create a layer, click on the background layer, create a layer, and I'm going to use now you can, if you want, you can just go to click on your digital layer and add a drop shadow. If you do it this way, you would just have to click where your light selection is coming from. Make sure it's on multiply blending mode. The color, you want to select your original backdrop color and then go a little bit darker from that. And then play around with your distance and your size. I don't touch the spread ever at all. Just the distance and the size until it gets where you want your shadows to look like on your skinny. That is one option to do it. I like to add a little bit more depth to my shadow on there. So I'm going to do it myself, which is a little bit harder, but if you take your time doing it, it can be easy. So I'm going to come back down to my layer here that I created, multiply blending mode, and then I'm going to hold down Alt on my keyboard and click that backdrop color, and then I'm going to make it a little bit darker here. Okay, and then I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to come down to the edge here on my backdrop. Oops, 100% opacity. And then I'm going to, once I click and hold it down, I'm going to hold Shift on my keyboard and I'm going to drag up. And that's going to make sure that it's a straight line. And then I'm going to do the same thing here for the bottom. Stop just before the edge of that because that's where the shadow would be. And then I'm going to create a layer mask on that. And then I'm going to zoom in. So I want this to seem like the skinny is laying on the backdrop. And then it's going to come out a little bit off of the backdrop towards down here somewhere. So I want to brush off some of my shadow up here, kind of do it in an angle to make it seem like the shadows being created as the digital is kind of floating off of the backdrop. Okay, and then over here, I'm going to get rid of some of this one too because it's not going to be as prominent because it's closer to the light source over there. So it's going to be a little bit lighter. And then I'm also going to brush off a little down there. Now I'm going to duplicate that and then click on that layer mask. I'm going to use a bigger brush here and I'm going to brush off all of that down here a little. So what I'm trying to do is create the most shadow right here in the middle because I want it to appear that it's floating off. So I'm going to get rid of that too, kind of feather it in. Zoom out. And now, as you can see, it added that subtle shadow. And then if you want, you can use your move tool and drag it out a little bit if you want and lower the opacity. As I said, this is a little bit harder than just using the drop shadow. So if you just want to use the drop shadow, that's fine. But I think this just looks a bit more realistic doing it this way. And then if you need to play around with your opacity on each layer, you can do that. Okay, next thing I want to do is add some blur to my skinny because it's quite in focus right now and it's behind her. So we do want to add a little bit of blur. So I'm going to come to my digital, go up to filter, blur, Gaussian blur. And then I don't want much because I want the illusion of it, that it's right behind her. So I'm only going to add about 2. Okay. And now I do want to brighten the image up a little bit. So I'm just going to add a curves adjustment layer, add some light in there, and then I'm going to brush it off of her face just a little bit. Some of the brighter areas so it blends a little bit more. And then I'm also going to bring down the opacity, I think, just a tiny bit on the overlay there. Let me see how much that, yeah, it just made it kind of blend into the backdrop. I think I want like 95. There we go. Okay, so that was that one. Let's see if I can do it before and after here. Before and after. I might even bring down the exposure just a tiny bit on the skinny. There we go. It's a little bit better. It's not so bright, and it looks more natural in the photo now as well. And then you can go back in and check your edges if you need to. So it looks like she is standing in front of it. So that's it. I'd be done with this one. Okay, so that's how you use them as skinnies. If you want to use it, like if you have a photo where they're standing a lot further away from the backdrop, just add more blur to the digital overlay, and it will create more of that depth for you to make it look more realistic. I could actually, you know what, I think I'm gonna add just a tiny bit of shadow on this side. I'm gonna create another layer. And I'm just gonna do a very, very thin line right here. Oops. I don't want it above my digital. I want it above my change it to multiply blending mode. I want it above my backdrop. So it's because if I do it up here, it's going to go on my digital too, and I want it behind my digital. Click and drag. There we go. Lower my opacity on that just a bit. There we go. And then we created just a subtle shadow right there because it would be laying on the backdrop right there too. And then if I want, I can brush it off where I created to get it to match that side a little bit. Okay, so now on to using them as texture overlays. I have so many tutorials on my YouTube channel. I'm already using texture overlays, but I'll just show it in this one if this is possibly the only one you've ever bought from me. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select all, edit, and copy. And then this is the image I'm going to be using for that one. Edit and paste. My backdrop was a lot bigger than my, oops. This right here is just to keep my proportions, so I'm not making my backdrop look all wonky. Okay, I'm going to hide that for now because I want to select my subject. I'm going to go down to my background layer, go to my selection tool, and select subject. Okay, it looks good. I'm going to duplicate that layer and create a layer mask. And then I'm going to drag my digital in between, make it visible here. And now size it to fit my image. Okay, and then I'm going to bring down the opacity quite a bit on that. And now for the floor part, I'm going to grab my marquee tool, my rectangle marquee, and I'm going to find where the floor crease is here. And I'm going to start there, drag all the way over, drag down to select that. And then I'm going to go to my move tool, click one of those corner boxes, make sure that this box up here is unchecked. Go to edit, transform, perspective, or you can right click inside the box and click perspective, and then grab one of your bottom corner squares here and drag that out. And that's going to create that floor effect on your digital to make it look like an actual backdrop in the studio. Okay, and then I'm going to put that back up to 100%. And then this is where you want to play around with your blending modes, depending on what color backdrop you originally used. I'm on white, so I'm going to use multiply. And then I'm going to come up to my adjustments. I'm going to add a curves layer. I'm going to create that clipping mask by clicking this box right here. And then I'm going to bring that up to where until it matches the tones of my original image. I'm actually going to brighten this entire image up just a bit here. There we go. And then I'm also going to add a levels layer and add back in a little bit more shadow. I'm going to bring that down, lower the opacity on my curves just a little bit. Okay, and then I'm going to, actually, let me see what this looks like on, yeah, I'm going to do multiply. I was going to try a different blending mode, but okay, and then if you zoom in, you can see again, it's pretty sharp. So we want to add our blur, so filter, blur, Gaussian blur. She's pretty close to the wall again, so I'm not going to add a ton. I think I'll only do 1.5 on this one. Okay, and then you're also going to want to go up to that layer mask and clean up your edges, which mine look actually pretty good. The feet could use a little work right here. 100% opacity, and just use that black and white brush to brush on and brush off. I'm going to hide this bar. I still want it to be a little bit lighter. I'm going to add a exposure And there we go. Bring that up just a little bit. And then I'm also going to create a layer mask on the digital. Only on like 10% opacity. Use a brush and just brush that off just a little bit on the floor. And now it looks like she's standing up against like a mural, like in like a tropical city or something. I'm gonna bring up I'm gonna add curves on just her. So I want to create that clipping mask. So these ones up here, that clipping mask wasn't created. So those layers applied to the entire image. So since I'm doing this clipping mask, it's only going to apply to her. And then I'm going to bring that up just a little. Okay. I'm going to brush this back on because I kind of do want this to be a little bit darker over there. Okay. I think that looks good. If you still have a couple edges, like her arm, yeah, her arm looks a little copy and paste right here. You can simply, once you're done, go ahead and flatten the image and then grab your blur tool and just add a tiny bit of blur right on the very edge, not a lot, on the very, very edge of where it's kind of still looking copy and pasted. As you can see, it blends it right in. And now there's a good fall off. It looks like lens blur added to the subject. Okay, so that's how you use them as digital backdrop textures. Again, try to make sure the lighting is coming from the right direction. I didn't mention that in this part of the tutorial, but I didn't have to because I already knew that it was. But this looks really cool. This to me looks like she's in like Maui or something and she found a mural on a wall and she's posing in front of it. So if you have any questions, you can send me a message. If you are a studio photographer, I would love you to join my group on Facebook. I will link it in the description. If you want more free tutorials like this one, be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel to be notified when I add more.